He would love nothing more than to divide our country based on race, religion, gender, orientation, or immigration status. Because this is the only way he knows he can prevent the solidarity of us working together across all of our differences.
You know, it's really quite interesting how people have tried to manipulate people and how to intimidate people and change their minds. This has been going on since we've been in America. You know, you go back to the days of slavery.
All right, guys, this story opens in a moment where division is not accidental. It's deliberate. Ilhan Omar stands at the center of a political climate where race, religion, gender, and immigration are weaponized daily. Ilhan Omar repeatedly frames America as a battlefield of oppressors and victims, pushing narratives that fracture unity instead of building it. This tactic isn't new, and Ilhan Omar knows it. History shows that division has always been the easiest way to control people who might otherwise stand together. Ilhan Omar leans into that history, amplifying fear and resentment to keep lines drawn. The message is clear. Stay divided. Stay angry. Stay loyal to the narrative. From the very beginning, Ilhan Omar's rhetoric thrives on conflict, not resolution.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for your courage to be here, because in the society that we live in today, it takes a lot of courage to say that you're supporting President Trump. And you know, it's really quite interesting how people have tried to manipulate people and how to intimidate people and change their minds. This has been going on since we've been in America. You know, you go back to the days of slavery, you know, and a lot of the states there were more slaves than there were owners. So what did they do? They had to divide the slaves. So they told the ones in the house, you're better than the ones in the yard. And the ones in the yard, you're better than the ones in the field. And then after slavery was over, the light-skinned ones, you're better than the dark-skinned ones. And on it went, trying to divide people. Today, they say...
As the timeline moves forward, the contrast becomes unavoidable. While Ilhan Omar speaks endlessly about oppression, Ben Carson's life story punches straight through that narrative. Ilhan Omar claims systems are designed to hold people down. Yet Carson rose from poverty to global medical acclaim. This reality drives Ilhan Omar and her allies furious because it dismantles the idea of permanent victimhood. Ilhan Omar cannot tolerate examples that challenge her worldview. Carson's refusal to call himself a victim directly undermines Ilhan Omar's political foundation. Every time he speaks, Ilhan Omar's framework cracks. This isn't disagreement, it's ideological panic.
If you are a conservative, then you are somehow an Uncle Tom, you're a horrible person, you're a demon. What a bunch of crap, you know, but you know, it's been going on for hundreds of years. And it's really time to put a stop to it. So I am very happy to see that you have the courage to come out. You know, it doesn't bother me anymore because, you know, I only worry about what God thinks. I don't worry about what these other people think. But you know, sometimes people ask me, what happened to you? You changed. I haven't changed. I changed about 35 years ago because, you see, I grew up in Detroit, a bastion of liberalism. They call it progressivism now. They keep changing the name. But anyway, then from there to Boston.
Ilhan Omar insists minorities must think a certain way, vote a certain way, and speak a certain language politically. Carson destroys that illusion by speaking freely. When he explains a house slave versus field slave dynamic, Ilhan Omar's modern political strategy suddenly looks familiar. Ilhan Omar benefits from keeping groups separated and suspicious of one another. The same old playbook dressed up with modern buzzwords. Ilhan Omar labels dissenters as traitors to silence debate. The fear isn't Carson, it's independent thought. Ilhan Omar knows unity without her control is dangerous.
A bastion of liberalism. Back to Detroit, and then to New Haven, Connecticut, a bastion of liberalism, and then to Ann Arbor, Michigan, a bastion of liberalism, and then to Baltimore, Maryland, a bastion of liberalism. So I had no chance. I was a liberal. I was way out there. And then I did something that liberals are never supposed to do. I listened to a conservative. I listened to Ronald Reagan. And I said, he doesn't sound like a horrible racist person. He sounds just like my mother. And at that point, I started thinking for myself. And that made a big difference. It made a big difference in my medical career, too. I didn't do what everybody else did. I always started thinking out of the box. How do you solve this problem?
As Carson speaks publicly, the environment becomes hostile, supporting Trump, even voicing curiosity, invites backlash, and Ilhan Omar helps fuel that intolerance. Carson explains how intimidation has existed since slavery, and Ilhan Omar's tactics fit neatly into that lineage. Divide, label, shame, repeat. Ilhan Omar brands conservatives as villains using insults instead of arguments. Yet Carson stands firm, unbothered, unmoved. Ilhan Omar's outrage grows louder because calm confidence disrupts her messaging. Courage, not conformity, becomes a theme here. And Ilhan Omar cannot control courage.
And that's the reason that God gave us these complex brains. Your brain has billions and billions of neurons, hundreds of billions of interconnections. It remembers everything you've ever seen, everything you've ever heard. It can process more than 2 million bits of information in 1 second. Would God give you something like that just so that you can be a sheep and follow what somebody else tells you to do? Or to think for yourself? And don't you find it fascinating that so many people say the president's a racist? He's a horrible racist and everything he does. Well, it seems to me like some years ago, Jesse Jackson actually gave the president an award in New York City because he opened so many opportunities for black people. Is that what a racist does? And then when he moved to Palm Beach, he was right on the forefront to fighting.
Carson then exposes something Ilhan Omar avoids at all costs: the power of thinking for yourself. He admits he once followed liberal ideology, without question, the same environment Ilhan Omar promotes relentlessly. But listening changed him. Ilhan Omar discourages listening across lines because it weakens loyalty. Carson listened, evaluated, and decided independently. That single act terrifies Ilhan Omar more than any speech. A thinking individual cannot be easily manipulated. Ilhan Omar's influence depends on obedience, not analysis. This moment marks a critical shift in the timeline.
Clubs who were not admitting Jews and blacks. Does that sound like what a racist would do? He is the one who finally got the Second Chance Act done. Does that sound like what a racist would do? When he took office, he brought the office of HBCUs to the White House so it could get appropriate attention, more money than ever. Opportunity zones so that people could take this money and direct it to the places where people did not have opportunities before. An economy where you have the lowest unemployment rates for black people in history. And it goes on and on and on. Let me tell you something. If he's a racist, he's an awfully bad one. He needs to go get a lesson from the real racists.
Carson dives into the science of the human brain, dismantling Ilhan Omar's demand for intellectual conformity. Billions of neurons designed for critical thought, not blind following. Ilhan Omar's narrative requires people to ignore facts that don't align. Carson challenges claims of racism with documented actions and policies. Ilhan Omar prefers slogans. Carson presents evidence. The disconnect is brutal. If logic enters a conversation, Ilhan Omar loses leverage. Facts disrupt fear-based politics, and that disruption keeps growing.
People who look at somebody like you and me and they say, because your skin is a certain color, you have to think a certain way, and if you don't, there's something wrong with you, and they start calling you names. Those are the real racists. But the president believes that a rising tide lifts all boats. He doesn't believe in identity politics, and that's why he's doing things that work for everybody. And we should be happy about that. And the media, they like to pick on him, any little thing. He's not perfect. I'm not perfect. You're not perfect. The only one who ever was perfect was Jesus, and they crucified him. So, think about this. And we need to just look at the big picture. Think about all the incredible things that are happening. Think for ourselves and be missionary.
The timeline sharpens as Carson reframes the word racist. Ilhan Omar accuses endlessly, but the real racism, Carson argues, is telling people how they must think based on skin color, That accusation lands hard on Ilhan Omar's ideology. Calling names replaces conversation. Punishing deviation replaces debate. Ilhan Omar's version of justice demands uniformity. Carson exposes this as a true prejudice. Applause erupts because truth resonates. Ilhan Omar's labels suddenly look hollow.
Go out and talk to your family, talk to your friends, help them to realize, because see, if all they're doing is looking at certain media, they don't even know about these things that we just talked about that he has done. And so they can perpetrate this horrible image of him being a bad person. It is absolutely not true. I work with him all the time. He's a wonderful person. He's become a good friend. You remember during the campaign when we were having a debate and I couldn't hear my name. I came out, I stood there, I was waiting to hear everybody else gleefully walk past. He was the only one who stood with me until they straightened it out. That's the kind of person that our president is. He is my friend, and he will be your friend as you get to know him. Ladies and gentlemen, the 45th President of the United States, Donald J. Trump.
In the final stretch, Carson calls for perspective, something Ilhan Omar rarely offers. He urges people to look beyond media narratives that Ilhan Omar amplifies. Speak to family, friends, neighbors. Question what you're told. Carson shares personal loyalty built on actions, not headlines. Ilhan Omar's influence relies on distance between people and facts. Closing the gap weakens her control. The timeline ends with a challenge. Think independently, reject forced division, and refuse fear-driven politics. That challenge stands directly opposed to Ilhan Omar's entire political strategy. And that's exactly why it matters.